Now, we're going to ask you for your brilliance and expertise at the tables. And so we're going to go into what's called the World Cafe. And it's a way of having conversations in community. But first, I want to introduce Ashley and myself again and tell you a little bit about who we each are. Again, I am Danae Aicher. I don't know how I feel about my picture being up on a big screen. I am your World Cafe co host. In addition, though, I am a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging consultant whose work focuses on the brilliance of the people in the room, the brilliance of all of us in our everyday authentic selves. And second, and important to this process today, focuses and centers inquiry, asks us to lead with curiosity. The other thing I'd like to mention about who I am is while I am new back to the state of Florida, I am actually a native Floridian, specifically a native Tampan. So, native to this broader Tampa Bay area with um, family on both sides of the bay, both Tampa and here in St. Pete. And that's important as we talk about civic engagement and building, creating, maintaining the communities that we want to see in this world. I come from a generation, I come from generations of women on both sides of the bay who were deeply invested in our communities and engaged in civic work, civic life in ways that we both highlight and are easily measured, and in ways, as Joe gave us an example of, ways that are not easily measured, right? So it might be the ways in which we support our neighbors, particularly in times of crisis. It might be, as Ashley pointed out in one of our meetings, any of the ways that we come together, like at a funeral. I want to acknowledge how you talked about that. All of the ways that we engage. I come from generations who were deeply invested in doing that. That is who I am. Ashley, who are you?
Hello, I'm Ashley Cooper, and I'm actually coming from Asheville, North Carolina. And yeah, I bring to you my career has traversed over 20 years from more of an Alinsky model of grassroots organizing and how we really create the conditions where the people that are most impacted are the ones who are leading change, to then how do we bridge that working with the city of Decatur on a large community, which is a city within Atlanta, a large community engagement process around being a more equitable and inclusive place to live, work, and play, maybe. And also, right now, I'm working in some rural counties around, again, participatory process for how we address substance use and the spending of opioid settlement money. But really, at the heart is how are the people who these lives are impacted by whatever it is that's going on actually being the influencers to the power of decisions that are being made. And so a big part of that is we've been talking about a lot of community engagement, and there's been the mention of the World Cafe process, which we're going to get a little taste of. Our time is short over these couple days, so you're just going to get a taste of World Cafe. But what I want to invite just to start is that this is a time where you really shift from being attendees to being participants. And this is also a time for us to slow down a little bit, because there's been, I know for me, hearing each of these speakers and thinking about, what do I wish that my politicians and my local community were in the room and that they were hearing, or how could I approach our large foundation and funder, my head's spinning. So this is a time to start to reflect on what does it look like to bring these pieces home. And what's really important is that you're bringing you. Whatever life experiences you have, whatever role you play in your job, role you play in your community, role you play in your family, that you have something to contribute to the conversation. You're making sense of what's being said in ways that somebody else sitting at your table isn't. And so I just really want to invite, say the thing ask the question. And then the other side is we talk a lot about community engagement, and often people in this room, we're like engaging them out there. We're engaging the community and we're in our positions. But really holding the question of how do we be engageable? What are the pieces that help somebody actually engage? And so this is also going to be a time to just try some things out, get a taste of like, where do you feel your own resistance to engaging? Or where do you feel your own kind of contraction of like, I don't like what she's saying right now, and my body is tightening up, and I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and I'm gonna stay there and slip out the door. If you need to do that, do it. I totally support you taking care of yourself. And I also invite to just notice in ourselves when we're resistant, what helps us relax and lean in and maybe be a little curious, like Danae was saying. So that is, and the other most important thing of this part is to connect with new people. That this is really a chance to, you've been staring, some of you maybe are sitting at a table with people you don't know, and maybe have been staring at each other for the last few hours and not really had a conversation yet. We're gonna break some of that down for you. So, with that.
One quick ad, given that, so prepare yourselves to be moving around the room and changing locations, sitting with different people. You aren't going to do it this very moment, but be prepared to work some muscles that have been sitting stiff for a couple of hours. And after this process, we are going to have a stretch break before going into the next part of today's work. So, who is in the room?
So I wonder, grab a marker. There's markers at everybody's table. There should be enough for everyone. This is going to be a like raise the marker if moment. So raise the marker if you have been involved in some community-wide process around some cause, any cause, but you've been a part of some community-wide process.
A marker, Joe, a marker.
and this is the time too. Look around. Okay, put it down. Now raise it back up if you were leading one of those community-wide processes. Okay. So like if you're curious to start leading one, notice who's got their hands up because they've done that.
Raise your marker if you have some sort of civic engagement in one of these areas, right? So we're gonna raise it, put it back down, raise it, put it back down. Hang on. Civic engagement in government, municipal, or state leadership. Raise your, awesome, look around, see who's in the room. Okay, put it down.
If you're questioning, it's true. It probably is that thing.
Raise your marker if you have civic engagement around, if you are engaged in civic engagement around voting. Voting. Okay. What about education? That's pre-K through higher ed. Look around the room. See
a lot of education in here.
Yep. All right, put your markers down. Raise your pens if you have civic engagement related to entrepreneurship and the business sector. Okay. That's the money, y'all. That's the money, just saying. Raise your markers if you've got engagement, if you are engaged civically with nonprofits. Okay, how about the faith community? Faith communities. Okay, so keep your markers up if that is you. And this is a place, unexpected, where I want everybody to look around the room. Raise your faith communities. So when questions come up about who's missing, right, we should also be asking why. When we are talking about civic engagement, I have lots of questions around who's not in this room. I hope y'all do too. Okay. And finally, in this place, civic engagement around philanthropy. Looking at you. It's more money, y'all. More money.
Let's do one more civic engagement around healthcare, including mental health care, physical health care. Great. Okay. Thank you. Just to get a sense so we know a little different, who's in the room representing an organization? Okay. And who's here not representing an organization, just becoming because of who you are in your community and how you show up? Great. Can we give a round of applause to those people? You know, I think that's a significant thing. Like, some people get paid to be in these rooms. Some people don't get paid to be in these rooms, and that makes a difference who can be there. Okay, what about, there's been Quijada talked a lot about research. And how are we tracking civic health? How are we measuring what you're doing? Who considers yourself a formal researcher? Oh, don't be embarrassed. Great, thank you. And who feels like what you're doing is research, even though an academic or institutional organization might not recognize it as research? Some like super high hands there. And I think that goes to, some of what has been shared by Joe and others, that how we define what we consider worthy of measuring and how we're measuring is really valuable. All right. So with that, let's let people talk to each other.
All right. Are you all ready to engage with each other? You don't count because you're a board member. So I'm asking folks in the room, are we ready to engage in conversations with each other? Okay. All right. It wasn't as resounding as I would have liked for it to have been, but we'll get to it. So we're going to ask you to find one other person at your table to share with for this particular part. So
you can also, your chairs roll really well, so if you need
Right.
to roll to the table next to you to find a person, that's okay too.
So what we want you to share with your partner is share about a time when you felt like your perspective, your voice was really heard and mattered in a conversation. Did. Okay? Share that experience. Go ahead.
And as you're sharing the experience, what really helped you feel like your voice was being heard? Was it something someone did? Was it something about the environment? What helps you feel like your voice is being heard?
It is up there.
So you're going to have about 6 minutes, about 3 minutes per person to have this conversation.
And we want a language thing here. We want to say heard and valued. Right? Some of us who are married may understand the distinction between those two.
Great. All right. Have at it. So if you haven't switched partners, you might want to go ahead and do that. Of another 3 minutes.
Okay, we're going to ask you to wrap up your conversations. And I'm going to ask you a second time to wrap up your conversations. I'm raising my hand, going back to what I've seen teachers do. Thank you, Joe. You are being the misbehaved student. I appreciate you. Okay. We're only interrupting temporarily because we would like to hear from you so that you can share with the entire room some of the things that you were sharing and your pair shares. So, um, the other Ashley and I are going to walk around the room. The Ashley with the good handwriting is going to write it up on the whiteboard. Wanted to make sure. So here's the question that we're trying to get from you. A little bit of the question that we asked you before. We're curious about the attributes, right, that contribute to your feeling like your voice is heard and valued. So what are some of the things? The attributes. What are some of the things that you can point to? So slow down, think. What are some of the things that you can point to that are going on when you are feeling like your voice and your perspective are heard and valued?
Well, so So we were having an interesting conversation because in my area, I teach mental health first aid, and we teach non-judgmental listening and our verbal cues and all, all my body posture and how can I rephrase and feel that the other person is being heard or listened. And so we were sharing that depending on the context, that may be different. For instance, if we are in a faculty senate meeting, I could have my minutes, my statistics, present my, very elaborately use my 3 minutes to have a talk. But then at the end, if there's no action, then I'm not going to feel heard or listened to, despite of my verbal cues or my preparedness or other. So we were just having a very interesting conversation about that.
So something actionable that was from what you said. Okay,
And I hear that the context matters.
thank you.
So we talked about transparency in communication makes us, each of us, feel valued. An example on my end, my boss called me and one-on-one asked my perspective on a decision at work, right? And said, I want to know what you specifically think before I talk about this among our staff. And so the transparency and intention in communication, I felt valued in that way. So transparency.
Thank you. So specifically transparency around how what you are sharing is going to be utilized, right? We were talking about that last night. We were talking about what feels extractive when we're listening to people. Like, what am I going to use for myself to make myself look good, right? Versus what am I going to use in service to valuing people. Okay. Who else?
I actually have two things from our roundtable discussion. The first thing was actually being sort of challenged and have the opportunity to have your ideas and work being improved and having somebody offering that constructive criticism. So it feels like you're being valued because people are taking it seriously and are offering ways for it to be better. And then also, I think, respect for your perspective, regardless of your age or expertise that you bring to the table, because everyone has something valuable to add and provide to the conversation.
Thank you. Out of curiosity, so let's say you are a younger person at a table full of AARP folks. I'm not looking at anybody in the room. Got my mirror. Oh, I'm not AARP yet. What would that look like to feel like you were not just at the table, right, but the value you bring as a younger person? Can we point to something like that would let you know?
Yeah, I mean, I've never sat at one of those kind of meetings yet. But I think, honestly, people responding to a perspective I share, not just being like, oh, it's great to have a young person at the table and, have my view be even coddled in a way, but I think being taken seriously and have a response that's actually acknowledging the content of what I'm saying when I'm bringing to the conversation, acknowledging that even though I'm probably a lot younger than the people at the table, I can still provide something valuable to an ARP meeting. So, yeah.
Just jokes.
That's great. Let's hear from one person.
Oh.
Danae, right behind you.
We chatted about some professional related items, but I think what comes up, just building on the element of respect you brought forward, is trust. I think if somebody comes to you and asks you about something, it's because they think you're trustworthy, that maybe you'll bring forward that transparency that somebody else added as a result of whatever it is you're engaged in doing. And I think if there's trust and there's respect, then there is valuation in the situation, which can lead to fruitful outcomes.
What's a way that you know that you are trusted beyond just being asked? Like, can you speak to that at all? How that feels? How do you know?
Well, I think you're trusted for your expertise in the situation. I think the fact that they approach you, because we were talking about professional endeavors, means that they think you have the skill set. So I think it's trust in your ability to do the work, trust in your professional expertise to complete the job, trust in the follow through, because we're also talking about that. What happens beyond that? Because it isn't just the here and now, it's what comes next.
Thank you so
Can I
much.
add one? You didn't ask for it, but can I add one too? Is that
Please.
okay? You give me a mic. I love a mic. Okay. This is more tactile, but I think eye contact and not being on your phone. So that sounds like a weird thing to say, but in meetings, if your phone is out on the table or you're not giving someone direct eye contact when they're providing feedback or information, even if they hear it, you could feel like they're not being valued or heard.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're gonna take these attributes and play with them. So one thing is, yeah, look, all those computers are closed. Amazing, beautiful. Thank you. So being aware of the context that we're in, being aware of our eye contact and our phone, and responding to the perspectives that are shared and the content that's being brought, and being open to, you know, my culture, we'd say some wrestling, some inviting inquiry and challenging each other, but in a super respectful way where everyone has something valuable to say. And yeah, action following what's shared. It's kind of hard to pull that off here. But so the invitation, I'm going to tell you a little bit about World Cafe, and then we're going to jump into a round of conversations. Let me make sure I have my right. There we go. So there's, on your tables is this sheet, and a lot of you have it in your folders also. You can take, oh, oops, nothing in there, which is the World Cafe etiquette. And this is just some invitations. I kind of struggle with the word etiquette sometimes, but guidelines, good, that says here. Some invitations for how we can be together with each other. So in addition to valuing each other's perspectives, one thing is there's not going to be facilitators at your table. So facilitate yourselves. Help to make sure everyone at the table's voice gets to be heard. Take that on amongst yourselves. To speak your mind and heart. We already spoke to that one a little bit. To listen for understanding. That really there are gems of wisdom in this room that have not been spoken from that stage yet. And so speak those gems. You might not know that they're a gem. They might just seem like a silly question to you, or like something that's been tugging at your stomach and you don't understand why for the last few hours. Speak those things, and also let's really listen to one another to understand each other. And a big part of this is to connect ideas, like listen for the patterns. What are the things that are coming up in multiple conversations between today and tomorrow? The insights, what are the deeper connections? There's a lot of really big questions that have been asked in this room already today. Like, what's some of that deeper insight that we can start to tease out and understand? And then the last thing I want to just say is truly doodle, draw. It activates a different part of our brains. Lindsay has been modeling over here. But feel free, like, you don't have to give everybody your 100% eye contact to be listening. You can just be playing. You can just be jotting down words. And when somebody else comes and sits at your table and lands upon that word, you don't know what kind of, or that little heart that you drew, you don't know what kind of a gift you might be giving them. So, with that, the way this is, oh yeah.
Oh, okay, it's on. Hang on real quickly before we go in, because Ashley D. mentioned earlier when we first started that this is a safe, brave space, right? Or a brave, safe space. It is both safe and it is both brave, right? So in order to have bravery and engaging in a conversation, we have to feel safe. And so we are asking that we all commit to that. What does that mean, practically speaking? We don't all have to disagree. And disagreement in and of itself does not mean that someone is right or wrong, good or bad. It is not in and of itself a bad thing, so we want to honor that. Disagreement and thoughts and perspectives and ideas often brings us to better solutions. So a little bit to what you were saying, right? Sometimes the challenge brings us to better solution. And in this case, intention does matter. So when we're listening, right, instead of listening for how much brighter I'm going to sound in my response, right? Instead of listening for how can I counter what this person is going to say, like really deeply listening. And if it leads you to anything, hoping that it leads you to some inquiry, right? So I can disagree with Joe and be like, I wonder. Ashley, you're really good at wondering things. So I just want to put that on the table for us as we go into these conversations, okay?
And we can listen to connect ideas. We can listen to where are those connections. Okay, so how this is going to work is I tried to get trash off, but if you know that there's some trash in front of you, just kind of scooch it to the middle of the table. And what we're going to do is we're going to do 2 rounds of conversation. And the way this works is there's 2 groups of people. There's the travelers and there's the hosts. So we're going to ask you a question. You're going to have some conversation about that question. And then afterwards, we're going to invite one person to stay sitting at the table. If moving around does not work well for you today, you be that one person to stay sitting at the table. And then the other people will travel to a different table so you can have some conversations with different people. Again, the table hosts, it is not your job to facilitate the conversation. The entire table is the facilitator. But what it is your invitation, nobody's job, but an invitation, is to welcome people to your table, like treat your table like it's your house and show some Southern hospitality of welcoming to the table, maybe kind of pointing out a few key things that were said in the last conversation that were like, ooh, our table had a lot of energy around this. If there's somebody wrote it down, you can point to it on the paper. And then we're going to walk you through this whole process, and I just want to highlight 2 points of World Cafe that are dear to my heart, that are a couple of assumptions, being transparent, a couple of assumptions that are underlying this process. One is that the knowledge and wisdom we need is already present and accessible. There is some knowledge and wisdom for some really hard questions that somebody's holding that is present in this room that might not get a chance to come out unless there's a certain set of eyes that are making eye contact and a different set of ears that are listening, that's going to make that insight have room to come into the room. And the other thing is that intelligence and innovation emerge when the system connects to itself in creative ways. So when y'all are in conversation with each other is when there's room for that innovation and intelligence to really pop. So with that, let's have some conversations.
So for round 1, we're going to ask you all to talk about what are you hearing today that is really hitting home for you, that is really resonating for what you experience in your home community or your sphere of influence. And where do you see people coming together in your community using their voices to address key issues? I'm going to give you some time to look, digest, process. What is this, Bob, that you are making gestures about? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Right.
I'm going to just note, maybe y'all can spread out because there's 4 people at that table, and if y'all become 7, maybe you could split into 2.
Right.
The ideal is to have like 4 or 5 people. If you
This
get
is
bigger than that, it's hard for everybody to have a chance to talk. So maybe, yeah, or
Maybe a few people come from each of these really large tables to occupy this middle table.
all right. Y'all got this. Make room for everybody to get to talk. That's the main thing. All right, enjoy your conversations. You'll have about 15 minutes. All right, if we could have your attention again. This is one of the awful parts of this process is we have to interrupt really juicy conversations. But for real, we are going to interrupt your conversation. Okay, so if you can hear my voice, take a deep breath.
If you care about Ashley's voice, take a deep breath.
We haven't established care
I'm looking at this
necessarily.
table over here that's closest to the front. If y'all care about Ashley's voice, take a deep breath. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, what are some things that you talked about? What's coming up for you from our time together today, from your conversation right now? What's really sitting present on your mind or your heart that might be valuable for the rest of the room to hear?
I'll ask my colleagues over here to jump in, but we kind of focus a lot on more casual opportunities to get together with neighbors, or even, what was the thing about the bar, beer and whatever? What and beer? Budgets and beer, where you could actually do some type of interaction with people on a whole range of issues, as long as they're not political on it, using technology in particular, where you don't have to verbalize your opinion on it, but can click your text of A, B, or C type of thing. I hope I said that right, Matt. But a lot of these things of fun events that we can do to enhance communication, where we actually share 90% of things with each other without any kind of conflict and avoid the rest.
Great, thank you. Did having like fun events, bringing fun, did that come up in any of the other conversations? Okay, good. So that's some percolating.
Right.
What other things? What other takeaways are you sitting with?
Oh, okay, sorry. Hi, everyone. I think one thing that we focused on was we got to the topic of cell phones, and that translated to the access of data and how much data we really have available to everyone now. And one of my table members mentioned misinformation and how this misinformation is now being more accessibly spread. And it translated into this conversation of how do we somehow allow this information to facilitate dialogue and open dialogue, but while also allowing people to get the correct education and allowing our members to be civically engaged through education.
Which makes me think, how do we make information available in fun ways that people want to engage? Just combining those two. Thank you. Did you want to say something different?
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about a different part of the same conversation. We started off talking about how obviously so many of the things we're talking about are being driven by people in positions of leadership. Yet we also discussed kind of the value of challenging authority, and how do you get people in leadership to try to encourage a culture that will lead to them being held more accountable, because probably not many office holders want to be protested. But theoretically, a more civically healthy society will have more protest. It would have more engagement. So how do we get leaders to understand kind of the value of being challenged and kind of voluntarily submit to being under more of a microscope and accepting more accountability for themselves?
Thank you. It makes me think about how many people raised your marker that you've been the leaders of large-scale community civic processes. And so, there might be folks in this room who others want to challenge. And what is it that helps you to kind of settle down and be open to being challenged? And how could that be shared with other folks who are wanting to do that in ways that are effective?
One of the things that we discussed in our table, we were addressing the second question, like strategies of coming together for your community to be able to be heard better. But one point was brought up that I really liked, and it was really interesting. So we're here talking about like, how can the community do it? How can they organize better to have better flowing public meetings? so they can be heard easier. Then someone brought up, it's like, okay, what if we switch it? How can we talk to our commissioners? How can we teach them to be better listeners? Like, why do we have to put it always on the community and how they organize themselves? What about the commissioners actually having like good listening skills and seeing when the public's getting emotional and why they're getting emotional? So that I really like that.
I mean, it feels like an answer to your question. Like this table is answering the questions in that table. Great. Okay, well let's go ahead and pause there. And this is that moment where one person is gonna stay at the table, and then the other people are gonna travel to a different table and feel the blood circulate in your legs for a minute and go find another table to sit at, and we'll do one more round of conversation before we take a break.
And while we are doing that, I want to connect your question about emotion and how can we use emotion as data? And do we use emotion as data and information? Well, you talked about having elected officials be responsive and understanding why communities are emotional, which made me think of how do we use community emotion as data, which is not how we think about it, right? But how is that a measure for us for information? I love it. Staying here, she's staying there?
Okay.
You ready to use that? Perfect.
All right, so for this next round, oh, y'all are so excited to see your new people. All right, if you can let me talk for just 45 more seconds, then I'll let you talk again. Please. Thank you. All right, so this next round, the question for this round is what challenges in your community could benefit from greater civic engagement, leading to better civic health? And I want to pull up some of those questions that Quijada ended us with. What are the specific barriers that are being faced here in Florida? What about how do we get more people talking about civic health than in all of the spaces where, it's only rooms like this that are talking about it? So I'm going to just add those in along with what challenges in your specific community could benefit from greater civic engagement leading to better civic health. All right, have at it.
right. All right. We're going to interrupt your conversation. Warning one. We're going to interrupt your conversation. Warning two. And we're going to interrupt your conversation. Warning three. Great. So, again, another share out. I can't even remember what we're harvesting now. What are some commonalities you all are hearing at your table? Quiet.
At your table or between the last two conversations?
So we talked a lot about how unity is necessary for any of our communities to thrive, and that sometimes the things that are lacking are shared vision, communication, communities feeling like home. These were themes that came up a lot for us talking about any community in Florida, and we're all from very different communities.
So, a desire for home and shared values, shared vision, and unity in community, right? Did I get that right? Okay. Who else? Commonalities that you're hearing at your table or between your two tables?
Or two examples that we spoke of, and now thinking of commonalities, I think misconception would be the word. So here we have a suburb, very diverse suburb, awesome, diversity all the way, but test scores are lowering. But people think that we're good because you could probably hint on it better, because it's diverse, but yet you're not seeing like an underlying issue that it's decline. Here, volunteerism. We see that people are volunteering, but maybe they're not volunteering in other things that could use volunteerism. So there's this misconception in our communities that we think we are doing civic engagement, but who are we not reaching or what are we not addressing? That in reality, we might not be we're not addressing the root of the problem or the outcome of this good thing.
When you say we think we might be doing civic engagement, who's the we?
Yeah, those two examples right there. Yeah, that's what I was referring to.
So like the people who are orchestrating the civic engagement processes and analyzing the data, would that be fair to say? Might think it's working and, yeah.
The example that she was referencing, it was the community in general, really, just having some blinders on to this issue. And so not really engaging around it the way they should.
Does anybody else have something pressing? And then, okay.
We have one more thing over here.
Sure, yeah.
I'm going to hold this microphone. Thank you very much.
There were several themes to this table. One had to do with it's kind of a failure to have a succession planning in leadership, whether it be more casual like PTA, Junior League, Rotary, whatever it is, not necessarily just the more official lines on it. Another area had to do with unwillingness to speak out in controversial issues, that those never come up because we don't talk about those kind of things. And a third one had to do with the need for especially government officials not to be waiting for people to attend public meetings, so to speak, but rather for them to be able to reach out into other kind of settings to get the input from the citizens on it in more natural settings. What have I forgotten? Yes, the whole thing on leadership, of being able to develop both competence, but maybe even more important at this point is confidence in your ability. And you're not going to have it all figured out. You'll figure out some of it as you go, but that confidence and competence, I think, are critical issues to develop in that planning.
So are we talking about competence and confidence among like those in the community as compared to those who are already sitting in positions of power. Because sometimes there's a lot of confidence that's undeserved there. I'm sorry, I didn't say that out loud. Did I
All
say
right,
that
well,
out
so we
loud?
want to take just a few minutes. You can talk and decide this as your table, or there's sticky pads on your table, and you can just like tear them off so everybody has one. And to just take a moment so we can see our collective thoughts here. Given the conversations you've just had, what are some priorities that could use attention in either your community or in Florida? What are some of those, we just heard some of them named in the room. What are some priorities that could really use attention either in your home community or in Florida? And maybe just put a little parentheses, whether it's, if you want to put your home community's name, if this is Orlando, you could put it, or just put in parentheses community versus Florida as a whole state.
Right. So we're thinking on two tracks, right? What is specific to our home communities and what might be broader? It could be the same, but what might be broader for the entire state?
It could use attention. Priorities that could use attention.
You need something, Hal?
If you feel like doing that thing where you wave yours that you're done, we're happy to pick it up. And just one more minute to write, and then we're going to wrap up and move to a break. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and as we're talking about civic engagement, we would like to offer you a place to leave questions that you're still sitting with, something that's, churning in your belly. It may not have an answer that is evident at the moment or today. But questions are important, right? Because they lead us to answers. So you can either use the index cards in the bowl in the center of your table to write the question, or something that we can hold on to if you are very tech savvy, use the QR code that will take you to a Padlet, which is an electronic way of collecting information. Speaking of civic engagement and how we're collecting information, all these various tools. So you can use your phone, take a picture of the QR code, and type your question into the Padlet so that we can hang on to it. Are there any more priorities that we didn't pick up yet? If you are writing your question on an index card from the center bowl of your table, please put the question back into the bowl. So put your index cards back into the bowl so we can collect them if you aren't using the electronic system. So for those who need support understanding how to work the Padlet, there should be a plus sign at the bottom of your screen. If you click that, it will give you like an electronic Post-it note and that you should be able to type into. And if you could just type one question per electronic Post-it note is the only way I can describe it. Right, just a question that's continuing to sit with you, churning in your belly, as Ashley would say.